Agafya, as always, greeted me with a smile. Still in the same pour, the same mischievous eyes, bilious as a child's, with radiant wrinkles and sparkles from the depths of the pupils. In the same sequence as before, Agafya tells how she lives, at the same time creates a fire, exclusively with a splinter, puts bread in the oven, boils water, prepares for communion, be with us priest Igor. And while Father Igor confesses Agafya, I go around her unsightly farm at sunset. I went along Agashina's path into the forest, here and there under the fir tree small firewood boxes are prepared, a lap. I visited one of the dogs, returned, looked into the barn, cereals, flour, salt, sugar, mixed feed, everything is there. A few days ago on the Lykovskaya Zanka there was a board with food from the Kemerovo region. There is something to eat, but Agafya still occasionally asks for provisions by satellite phone. This is already a lasting memory of the hungry times that her family experienced in the 60s of the last century. Let it be better to have supplies. Yes, she is a satellite phone in extreme cases, donated by friends from the mainland, so to speak, alarm button. The puppy that was also brought in November, diligently and menacingly tries to scare me away from Agash's supplies. I promise him not to touch anything and photograph the notes attached to the doors by Agafya's hand for newcomers and uninvited guests, the text of which, translated from Church Slavonic into our modern language, means something like this. Without my permission, no one can enter or take photos. See photo. I go into the little house, and there are mismatched kittens splashing in the corners. On an ancient loom, someone has brought an old article, one of those famous ones, about the taiga dead end. The loom is dripped with wax, so sometimes Agafya still weaves by candlelight. On the window is a birch bark box, in which rutabaga is planted. On the wall is a fishing net, rags, ropes, a gun. On the shelves are dishes, belongings, cereals, crackers in a closed bowl. On the windowsill are old books, bound in wood and leather. On the covers, all the same wax drops and paraffin puddles, their owner reads daily. Well, she came out after communion and immediately watched the bread. I'm with the gifts for her. Here, Agafya, this and that. This is for this is for that. These are warm pants, remember, I promised. These are canvas bags for herbs, candles, a shoemaker's needle, a skein of wool, good people gave you. Agafya looks, smiles, and says, as if singing, in her old Slavonic, so unfamiliar to my ear. The speech is slow, muffled, a kind of chant, more like a cooing than a human speech. I know that Agafya will not use most of the things she brought, because she is such a person. Well, except for mittens and socks will take. Thanks to the help, she has everything, and buckets, and pots, and flashlights, and batteries, something she uses, something not, but the closest thing to her is old native things, birch bark to ski, decayed clothes, well, rubber boots, dishes, axes, candles and lanterns, and the rest of the gifts are lying in the attic as unnecessary. Here and now she looks at the new colorful handkerchief that the good woman from Gorno Test gave me, and says smiling, somehow in a special soft burr, beautiful. And then, no, I'll get dirty. Agafya adjusts the iron pot in the stove and meanwhile complains about the bears as usual. He says, laughing, but with a sincere childish fear, oh, how I run home, the dog runs after me, I scream, there is no Patmo, help, I throw explosives, I don't see where, but I throw them, and I run, I suffocate, and the dog runs. Stryoshner. He shakes his head. The explosive, as I understand it, is a signal stick left by the Ministry of Emergency Situations. The vocabulary of the hermit with the years is enriched with new concepts. Wow, I think, the birch bark stove melts and the flare can ignite. I can't even do that. Not a simple Agafya. And she really is not simple, with a steel rod inside, otherwise she would not have survived in the remote taiga alone, after the death of all her relatives. One-on-one with the mountains and the forest. If I'm not mistaken, she's been alone since 1988. To fulfill the precepts of the faith of our ancestors, to sing psalms, to praise God, and to work, doing hard daily work, surviving in the impassable thicket. And again Agafya Karpovna talks about her ailments and asks to take away the kittens that breed in the cat family. From Agafya there is absolutely no smell, it is like a forest, like the air of the forest, although, as you understand, it is not washed as often as we are. And please don't ask me how often and where she washes. It's a different person. A person who was born in the taiga and survived in it, he is different. In order to understand him, you need to get up from your head to your feet. Well, or upside down, depending on the situation in which you live. I take pictures of her from time to time. She patiently tolerates, but turns away. She cannot be photographed, although she is already used to it. By the way, not looking at the camera is a sure protection from the evil eye. But I try not to annoy and not to be impudent, while the old believer talks with Erofey Sedov, the son of Erofey, the same taiga man who lived next to the hermit for several years, and the same one who once worked as a master driller in the expedition of geologists who discovered the Lykov family. Worldly news does not particularly interest her. We did what we thought, it's time to leave. At parting, the men check the satellite phone. There are 59 rubles left. They ask what else is needed. They will bring it to the next arrival. And now I know exactly what Agafya needs, and if God willing, I will bring it next time. Agafya does not show any emotions when saying goodbye to us. Having lived all her life alone, she will never get along with other people. She does not expect guests, and therefore I intuitively understand that she is already waiting for our departure. Agafya likes to tell such a legend about her birth. When her mother was already over 40, it was time to give birth to her fourth child, and she could not give birth to the burden for 2 days. The husband rushed to the 300-year-old cedar. "Forgive me and save my wife and child." And he struck the cedar with the axe. By the end of the day, he had cut a full-sized tub out of wood, dragged it home, filled it with water, and warmed it up with hot stones. He lowered his exhausted wife into it, and she immediately gave birth to a daughter, Agafya. The child was possessed by the spirit of Taiga's father, Cedar. It is he who protects the forest hermit from dangers and diseases. For those who do not know who I am writing about, for the first time, geologists discovered the Zamka of the Lykov hermits in 1978. Agafya Karpovna then turned 34 years old, now she is 74 years old. The old believers of Lykov fled to the remote places of the Siberian taiga from the persecution of their faith in 1936. All that the children of Karp and Akulina knew about the outside world, countries, cities, animals, and people in general, they drew from adult stories and Bible stories.